Greetings, my General Baptist State Convention family, both physically and virtually, in the name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus the Christ. It is in Him we live, we move, and we have our being, and we are certainly grateful and thankful that we have this opportunity to be together for this segment of our annual session of our General Baptist State Convention, featuring the Young Preachers Network of our convention. We are certainly grateful and thankful that we have these few moments to share, and we certainly give all praise and honor to God, as well as we give honor to our president and all leadership of our convention. The whole purpose of our gathering on this day for this hour is to represent and to present some of the up-and-coming theological minds that God has blessed us to have as gifts in the state of North Carolina. With every gift that God gives us, there is purpose. And so because there is purpose, we want to take a moment to hear their hearts as it relates to ministry, as it relates to serving in the kingdom. We certainly thank you for joining us here in the sanctuary, and equally we greet you across God's great globe. Thank you for joining us for this hour. In the book of Proverbs, chapter number 27, verse number 17, the word of the Lord declares that as iron sharpens iron, so one man should sharpen the countenance of his brother. One of the greatest things about ministry in the early stages or in the young stage is that we possess that ability and that gift to be able to sharpen one another, to make one another better. And so for the course of the time that is ours to share, we have with us today 4 of our up-and-coming preachers of the gospel who represent our Young Preachers Network. I'd like to take a moment now to, of course, introduce them to you, and then we're going to move right into our discussion. To my far right, we are certainly happy to have with us the Reverend Tara Gibbs, who is the minister to youth and children at the Myers Park Baptist Church in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. Yes, we can welcome her. Yes, yes. Sitting next to her, of course, is the great leader of our Young Preachers Network. We thank God for his leadership. We thank God for his ability in the personality of the Reverend Adrian Bullock, who also serves as the Triangle Area Campus Minister of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of North Carolina, and is a member of the Watch Chapel Baptist Church in the city of Raleigh. To my far left, we are certainly grateful to have with us today the Reverend Michael Eley Jr., who serves as the Minister of Youth and Young Adults of the Friendship Chapel Baptist Church of Wake Forest, North Carolina. And certainly we dare not forget our final participant, who serves as the youth minister of the Springfield Baptist Church of Garner, North Carolina, in the person of Minister DaQuan Isom. Would you help me welcome our panel for this discussion? Well, we're going to get right into it. We're going to have some good conversation today, and it is my prayer that this conversation is not only of help to young preachers across our state, but I pray even the more that this conversation will also be helpful to those of us who are engaging and embracing young preachers as they take the stand, because it is so important, I believe, for us to realize that among them are the next leaders of our convention. Among them are the next leaders of our Baptist denomination. And I firmly believe that if we embrace, empower, and encourage them now, they will be of great resource to us, not only now, but in the days to come. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We got a few questions that we have sent to you prior to our time of gathering, and we're going to give opportunity for them to share. First things first, here's the first question. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5, Paul told Timothy some practical instruction. He gave some very practical messages. And among those messages, as a father to a young preacher, he said to them that you must make full proof of your ministry. Let me begin with the ladies today. Ladies go first, Reverend Tara. Let me begin with you. In your mind, in your own words, what does it mean to make full proof of the ministry?
Sure, thank you. So the first thing I did when I saw that scripture is, the scholar in me, is to look at different translations.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the translation that doesn't say foolproof ministry, but it says effective ministry. That's a language that's accessible for us right now, right? And I can't help but think of even the session we just had with Reverend Dr. Croft, in that we cannot be effective in ministry if we are not whole ourselves as best we can. We're still human. And that means, in particular for me, it means that I have to make sure that I'm looking out for myself, because who else will, right? Ministry is hard. Ministry is tiring. Ministry is exhausting. Ministry is changing, right? Ministry is shifting, okay? And so it's really important that in all of that, that I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I know where I'm going. So I feel like I can be more effective and to my full effectiveness if I am making sure I'm taking care of myself. And I know there were some questions about self-care, but I'm jumping ahead. But self-care is so important, because we think of the way the West, in particular white Western culture, has taken that term, and it means light a candle and take a hot bath. That's your self-care. Maybe, but your self-care may also be taking that medication you needed. It may be going to the doctor about that thing you've been worried about for some time. It may be taking the day off to do nothing, right? There are other ways that we need to make sure that we are taking care of self. And so for me, I know I am most effective when I'm rested, when I've eaten well, when I've had good time socially with friends and family and loved ones. And so when I take care of those parts of myself, because I'm also a child of God, right? Not just who I'm serving, but when I am taking care of self, then I am able to be more effective in ministry.
Awesome. Building on that effectiveness question, Reverend Bullock, let's take that a step further, particularly in your role of moving with Baptists across the state. What does effectiveness look like for you in ministry?
When I think of that question, I think of the stick-to-itiveness to it. When in ministry there are ups and downs, there are those that believe in your vision, believe in what you believe God has called for you to do, and then there are others that may believe that this is something that could be done in the far future, but really staying gun-ho to that. I'll use for an example even this network. The network started during the pandemic,
right.
And it was actually something that was birthed out of the Preaching Under 40 session within our convention. And the idea arose of having a network that was able to connect with different young preachers within the life of the convention. And as I was sharing this idea, there were some that were very supportive, and then there were others that said, you know, that's a good idea, but I don't think the convention will even want to do something like that to that degree right now. And so when I think of that, I had to push through that. Kept calling, kept texting, kept sending emails until we have the network that we have today.
Absolutely.
So when I think of that scripture, I think of the stick-to-itiveness until it happens. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And you are to be commended for the job that you have done in gathering young preachers across the state to really make sure that our state convention understands that even young preachers have something to offer the state convention. I think we ought to really celebrate the great work that he has done. Reverend Eley, same question. What does full proof of the ministry look like to you?
So when I consider full proof of the ministry, in a similar stance, I think of the word faithful. And so with that, I've found so many preachers, young preachers, they'll start an assignment, then they'll easily move from it. They'll start an assignment, and then when they see something that looks more flashy, right, when it looks like that it glitters a little bit more, they will move from where they are to where they think they want to be, and they forget that everything that glitters truly is not gold. And so being faithful to the place that you say that God has called you to be, and to work all of it, to work every piece of it until you have done what God has called you to do.
That's an awesome point that you raised. That is an awesome point, because Along with that, it is that importance of trusting the process through the process. To understand that everything is not going to come as quickly as you want it to come, but if you are willing to stick to it until the very end, you actually see the strength of that calling. Now, I heard something, Reverend Isom, and I'm sure you heard it too, that as Reverend Bullock said, that there were some that were supportive, but then there were some who said, well, I don't think that's going to work. As a young preacher, how important is support from those who've already been down the road you have yet to travel? How important is support for young preachers? What would you say to that question?
Absolutely. So even in my personal experience, one of the greatest things that I, take to heart was the consistency with which my pastor, Dr. Kevin Sturdivant, as well as my pastor of my home church, Reverend Clyburn, were always able to extend their grace towards me, willing to, forgive me when I made those mistakes, but also being there to help me get up, after I fail. I think that, in terms of support, that is the greatest thing that we can give to young preachers, is to make sure that we know that, you're there, that you're not just there to, stigmatize them because they are young or because of, wherever background you come from, or even to let them know that if you need me, I'm just a phone call away. That's one of the biggest things that I personally have experienced that matters.
And I think if we could really have that conversation for the four of you, I think that that's a great conversation for us to have. That's a moment for us to consider. What would you say, the four of you who are in ministry are considered young preachers, not so much age, but more so years in ministry? What would you say to some of us who have been at this for a minute and have served for years? What would you say, or what do you wish older preachers or preachers who've been on the scene for a minute truly would engage and understand about your assignment and your ministry? What do you think? What do you think? Who wants to tackle it first? I don't want to draft, but I think I can. What do you think, older ministers? Talk to me, Reverend.
Sure. Yeah, I think something that we see often is that just because a preacher is young in age and maybe even young in experience, that the first place that you're put is in the youth ministry.
Oh, wow.
You may be put in the young adult ministry, something like that, when in all actuality, all of our ministries don't always fit in those boxes, right? And so being able to understand that each of us are different, each of our callings are different, our giftings are different, and so to be able to embrace who we are and to embrace our gifts in the best places.
And I'll even add to that, the big thing of not putting young preachers into a box, not believing that just young preachers are here for the lights and the cameras and the podium and just preaching. But preachers are serious, especially young preachers. There are some preachers that are really serious about their call.
Right.
There's some preachers that are serious about ministry. And of course, grabbing the mic is not the biggest thing or the only thing that they do. But there are people that actually do work Monday through Friday. Absolutely. Outside of the church on Sunday morning. But there are young preachers that are serious about the call, serious about the work of ministry, serious about witnessing for the kingdom of God.
Amen. And I'm so glad that Reverend Bullock said that, as somebody who was called to my previous congregation as a minister of youth and college students, right? That's my passion, but that's not everyone's. Just because of my age, particularly with my gender too, it's, she needs to work with the young people and she'll relate to them and she's going to be a caregiver. And I do have a passion for that age group. But what also happens is that some older ministers and preachers and pastors also, it really shows that they don't have an appreciation and a respect for that age group at all. Because you're willing to put your newest minister, fresh out of seminary, untrained, unschooled, just still wet behind the ears, and say that that's good enough for children. That's a problem, right? That's the default. What are we saying? Because as a youth minister, I'm their pastor. When their friends commit suicide, they don't call the senior pastor, they call me. right? When they're thinking about suicide, when they lose friends, when they're struggling, when they're going through, they call their pastor. Wow. So I love this conversation that we're agreeing that we can't be boxed in, but we are to be respected and treated in a certain way too. That doesn't mean I know it all. I certainly don't. Right. I still have growing and learning to do too. But all I ask is to be respected and for what I do too, right? The work I put in, the time I put in. I study for my young people, right? I'm not just getting up and just doing any old thing. I take courses on childhood development, right? That's not even my interest necessarily, but to be more effective for that age group. And so I know all these preachers and every other young preacher that I know does the same thing, whether that their passion is a senior ministry, whether it is dealing with Christian education and spiritual formation, whether it's dealing with congregational care or missions work, whatever it is. I've seen my siblings at the same age and my peers and colleagues put in the work. And so all we ask is every now and again, just respect that.
You know, Reverend Tara, you really raised something that I want to sort of present a follow-up question to you. In understanding the fact, you made a very valid point that I think we senior pastors sometimes fall guilty of, in that we pushed you in positions without proper preparation. We put you in assignments and we do not take the time for teaching and training. In your mind, how does that look? What sort of teaching and training would you feel as a young preacher is needed and necessary before you are placed in a position of leadership at that level? What are your thoughts?
I'm glad you said that, because my answer originally to your first question was that it feels like a lot of times older ministers, pastors, preachers who've been in this in a long time hand us a roadmap, right, to navigate. That sounds good. It looks good. But a roadmap is very stagnant. A GPS keeps you updated with what's going on, right? But a roadmap is very stagnant. It'll get you to a point probably, but it probably doesn't know the new interstate. Wow. Right? Wow. So you've handed me something very valuable. You've been very, I'm grateful for it. I really am. Right. But then you add in stuff like the pandemic and COVID, the landscape is changing as we speak. Absolutely. Right? So to answer the question, I want to think about it a little bit more too and hear from my colleagues, but what I would like is more opportunity. And I'm speaking a little bit more honestly on behalf of my peers and colleagues who I talk to. I'm very appreciative that I get a lot of opportunities to preach, teach, and lead while being young in ministry. But I hear so much how, this is my one time out the year to preach. Wow. You never get better at preaching if you don't do it. And not just to, in your house at your reunion or little things like that in the little small session. You need an experience to preach in front of the congregation, right? Part of learning is struggle, and we don't do well with that. We don't like to see people struggle. And that's a cultural shift, but I would say that we have to be willing to give people a chance and be okay as they struggle through it, because that's the only way to grow. Struggle is a part of the learning process.
I love the way you said that, of having to deal with the fact that there are those in the roadmap generation compared to those who are operating with GPS. So Reverend Isom, my question to you is, how do we bridge that gap? That gap between the roadmap and GPS? Because think about it, there are some folks who are stuck in middle still dealing with MapQuest. So how do we bridge that gap between the roadmap and the GPS? How do we do that?
Absolutely. So I've been blessed to be able to work in ministry full time. So that is my day job.
God bless you, sir.
And out of that experience, my pastor's door is only 2 doors down from mine. And he has a revolving door policy wherein if I ever have a question, if I need some advisement, or if I just need to vent, his door is open. And I think that is something that I'm appreciative, but also something that, other pastors can emulate, because they're called as a senior pastors not just to pastor the congregation, but also to pastor their associates. And that is something that, we miss all too often. We leave the associates to do whatever they're going to do in their corner of the church. And hope that it works out well, but if it doesn't, we might sit them down for a year. Instead of, instilling in them, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, and this is why I say this, this is my experience. Being an open book to share, what they've been through and how they got to where they are today, is something that I believe,
You say something that I think we often and we should consider. let's consider the fact that sometimes if there were more empowerment, there would be less need for discipline. That if we spend more time training and imparting into the next generation of preachers, when they make the mistake, we can extend more grace than discipline. You know, Keon Henderson once made this statement that people want grace from the pulpit, but they're never willing to extend grace to the pulpit. So how is it that we overcome this? What is, if we had to develop a strategic plan, the five of us, if we had to develop a strategic plan to help young preachers be able to bridge that gap with their predecessors, their mentors, their senior pastors, what would that look like? How would we navigate that from a young preacher's perspective? What do you think is needed to really navigate a strategic plan to strengthen the connection? Talk to me, Remy. Talk to me.
Sure. You know, I have the privilege of serving my pastor, the Reverend Dr. Enoch Holloway, who just celebrated 40 years of pastoral ministry at one church.
Right.
And then my father, he's been in ministry, but he's only been pastoring going on 3 years. And then I've been in the ministry, feels like forever, right? One of the things that I talk about with them a lot, and we often kind of go back and forth in friendly banter, is the need for intentional conversations. I feel like a lot of times as young preacher to seasoned preacher, that we only want to talk about things when it becomes a problem. And so rather we allow things to happen versus taking those moments before they happen to have the intentional conversations of this is what you do and this is what you do not do. Or rather, well, it's okay if you make this mistake, but you have to understand the consequences of that mistake. And so I believe that if we would move ourselves into the direction of having more intentional conversations, that we will be able to have a better understanding of where we both come from, being able to bridge that generational gap and to meet somewhere in the middle for the good of not just the ministry and for the clergy relationship, but for the people in which that we all lead together.
And I love the way you say that, because what that says to me is before you are an associate minister, you were first a member that has submitted to pastoral leadership. So in order for that bridge to be strengthened in ministry, there first needs to be that, as you say, that intentional conversation. I'm a member. You're watching for my soul. Watch for my soul just as much as you're willing to watch for my ministry. Is that a good way to summarize that? Is that a good place to put it?
Sure. And you know, I think I would even take that a step further, in a sense, as being a young preacher who has had the opportunity to sit with shepherds. With us still being members, we're still sheep ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so we kind of are in this place where we are sheep with shepherd's eyes.
I like that.
And so we know enough to still identify with the sheep, but then we also have enough access to behind the scenes to understand what the shepherd might be thinking. And so though we're not fully sheep, we're also not fully shepherd. Right. And so we have to navigate that area.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm going to preach that somewhere. I don't know where, but I'm going to preach that. Because really, in a real sense, when I think about that, I think about something my father, who was a minister, had he lived today, he would have been preaching. This would have been his 51st year of preaching the gospel. Daddy used to always say to us that as preachers, we ought to have two buckets at all times. One should be filled with water, and the other needs to be filled with gasoline. And he said, wisdom comes in knowing which bucket to use at what time. Because sometimes we're using water on fire when we really need to use gasoline. Yes, sir. And vice versa. Rev Isom, jump in this, because I see it. I feel the text already. So jump on in with it.
So all I was going to add was that, what we're doing here is a great starting place.
Absolutely.
The network was, one of the reasons why it was created was to be that conduit for elder preachers as well as younger preachers to have those roundtable discussions, to share dialogue, to share insights, or to do, as what was said a couple of days ago, to reverse mentor, said to be, because that is also important. There is an idea that may exist, that when you get to a certain level or after you have been in ministry for a certain amount of time, you have this bit of wisdom, if you will, that's a good way of saying it, that other people may not have.
Right.
I believe that's, you have to share that.
Right. Absolutely. So building on that conversation, here's my question for all of you. Considering the fact that we see you as the next generation of great theological minds, from you are going to give birth to the next phase of growth in ministry. Let me ask the four of you, what is your missionary vision for the church as we move and navigate through the 21st century? What would you say is your missionary vision? Reverend Tara, you talked about passion.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take it that way. When it comes to the church, what's your passion? Because out of your passion is going to give birth to your vision. So share with us.
Sure, I'll answer both questions. So my passion is actually, I would say, like spiritual formation, Christian education, right? I love connecting the things that I've had the privilege and honor of learning in seminary and the academy and bringing it to the church, because it honestly frustrates me when I see a lot of my peers who sat in the same classes I did, learned the same things, read the same books, but when I go to their church and hear them preach, they sound like a completely different person.
Oh, wow.
That's a problem. All of a sudden, all their education just got put out the door. That's a concern. So that's my passion. I believe that there's so much new scholarship or just emerging scholarship and so many great things that would really address some of the needs of the everyday person today in a very relevant way, right? That's what people are always asking for. What's relevant? What's going to speak to someone? And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of pastors and preachers rest in the comfort of, if I just always go to the cross, that's going to solve everything. In some ways, yeah, but in other ways, not quite. And I feel like there's so much more if we would just be a little more brave in the things that we share. So that's my passion. My ministry dreams, mission dreams for the church leans in, I think I want to see us get outside the church more. We, again, lean into what's comfortable, and that's inside the church walls, right? And we try to go out there to bring people in here when we need to be ones going out there and then sometimes staying out there, if you will. There are so many great people and so many organizations, mutual aids, nonprofits, NGOs doing great work, but we're so upset that the church name isn't on it, that the church isn't at the forefront. Now we don't want anything to do with it. Grassroots organizations, drives, and donations and things happening, but where's the church? And we need to be a part, not lead. Sometimes we just need to be a part and support and not have to get our name on the front, put the church logo in the front, sponsored by, sometimes we need to cut that out and just go do the work.
That's good.
When I think of passion, Reverend Gibbs mentioned, I see myself working within the life of the church. Church has always been home. It's always been a refuge for me. I see myself, as far as ministry, moving into pastoral ministry. Outside of just Sunday morning and, of course, the regular routine. One of my passions is, we had a conversation about this earlier, looking out into our congregation, seeing the needs of the people outside of just Sunday morning and taking it to the cross. Like, are your needs being met? Do you have tutorial programs in your area? Are you able to keep your lights on? Can you feed your children? Do you have a decent job? Do you have decent living conditions? Historically, the church has been, especially the black church, has been the center of the community. And I don't think that we should lose that lens, that model. But I think that we also need to come to 2022 and recognize some things that we can do to update that mission. The mission doesn't have to change. just the way in which we do it needs to change. So I see myself working within the life of the church, ministering into the community as well around the church, but also making sure that the needs of the people are being met that come to church Sunday after Sunday. I can't preach to you about how he'll supply all your needs, and then you go home and you can't keep your lights on.
Wow.
So I wanted to make sure all of that works together.
That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. Come on, Reverend Isom, jump in. Here's your first point. Jump in. Jump in.
So my undergrad experience, I'm a political scientist by training, and because of that, one of the passions that I have is in the life of institutions. So in our community, our institutions have for a while been in decline. They have been struggling to keep up with the times. So as far as my ministry goes, one of the books, this is another question, that was very impactful on me was written by Senator Warnock, The Divided Mind of the Black Church. And in that book, he talked about navigating the space between the public prophecy mission of the church, as well as the polity or the life of the church within the walls. Right. And I believe that, my space is trying to navigate that space to make sure that our institution, the church, is involved with our institutions in the public square, so that we can do some of the things like Adrian and Sister Tara touched on, making sure that people can supply their needs as far as keeping their lights on, because there's a policy aspect to that as well. We can preach it in the pulpit,
Absolutely.
but we have to go to the ballot box,
Absolutely.
and not just in at the ballot box, but we also have to go to the city hall, have to go to the General Assembly, to Capitol Hill, to make sure that we get what we need for our people. And the pastor has a role in that.
Absolutely.
We can support, but we can also lead.
Absolutely.
We have plenty of blueprints that show us how to do that, demonstrated by other communities, not in the 60s, because that is long past.
Right. Right.
But even 2020, 2 years ago, or even today, some of the online movements or our people taking to the streets where the church was condemning the people for their expression of their fear, of their frustration, instead of saying, hey, I care for you. I understand why you're behaving this way. But instead of condemning you, I'm also going to take your message and I'm going to deliver it in a way that other people can understand.
That's good. That's good. Got a follow-up question for you. Considering that you are a political scientist by trade, by study, there is a wall of divide that has come up between the policy and the prophetic, to the point that the church suffers. We often talk about needing to be prosperous, but we don't provide our people with the tools to be prosperous in every area of your life. What is, in your opinion, the disconnect between policy and prophetic that we need to address?
So I have a couple of ways to look at that.
All right.
So the first way is navigating a space where we have to be careful not to use the pulpit to push our personal agendas or our personal views.
Very good.
Because that is something that was touched on yesterday when the woman did the presentation on Christian nationalism. So if we are going to be critiques or have critiques of that, we can't do the same thing. But there also is a responsibility that Jesus talked about in his first sermon in Luke chapter 4, when he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. So we have a responsibility to preach it, but not just preach it, but also to practice it.
Right.
And so whether that looks like your pastor filing and running for office like Raphael Warnock did,
Right.
whether that looks like your pastor calling up his friend that comes to his church every 4 years, every 2 years to give a speech from his pulpit, and also holding them accountable. Say, well, you can't come next time.
Right.
Because instead of delivering for our people, you came. You even preached us real good when you mentioned the Bible, in which you mentioned Jesus, but you didn't deliver when it came time for you to cast your vote on the floor.
Right.
And so I believe that that is where the church has to position itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking that. You handled that masterfully. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Reverend Eley, back to the original question. What is your missionary vision for 2022?
Sure. So my passion is very much so the empowerment of the local church. I still believe in the local church. I still believe in the black church. I believe that God has anointed us to be ambidextrous so we can take sides, but I also believe that we should be prophetic enough to take over. And so with that, one of the things that I really push at my church is that things should not be happening in our town without them coming to our table. And so with that, now we have postured ourselves through the town of Wake Forest, and then as well with Wake Forest University, Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and others, that as they begin to do new things and new initiatives, including looking into reparations, that they are now coming to us because they understand that if it had not been for our church being a pillar in the community, that our community would not be what it is today. And so with that, because I believe in the empowerment of the local church, I believe that the mission field has changed. COVID helped to be able to say, hey guys, wake up, look and see what the mission field is now. Yes, I care about those who are down the street. Yes, I care about those who are directly in my church and the needs that they have, but I believe that our mission field is online. And so what would happen if we were able to maximize our fingerprints to be able to help keep track and care for our footprints? So in other words, what I'm saying is, imagine if we were able to expand our reach so that our online presence and the finances that came in from online took care of all of our needs in-house. Now we can take our money in-house and do what needs to be done in our communities and for those who are there. And so very much so, I believe in the evangelistic model of the church and believe that we should go everywhere, wherever they can hear, wherever they will listen, go and share the message of Jesus Christ.
Now, I must celebrate all four of them at this moment. Please let me do that, because in a real sense, their passions are different. Their missions are the same. The method is different, but what you see here are four gifts to the kingdom who have a true heart for ministry beyond the sacred desk. Can we celebrate them for that? That is so important. I want to shift the conversation in our final moments. Allow me to, if you will, to just shift the conversation. Because I think all four of you will agree with me that no matter how long you have been in ministry, ministry is stressful. And I think, Remtara, I heard you say that in the outset. Ministry is stressful, so there is a need for self-care, all right? I want to ask you, how would you encourage those in this same age bracket, your counterparts, your fellow colleagues who are operating with the GPS? What would you say to them about the importance of self-care? Because what I see is I don't want to see you guys make the same mistake I made, where I'm constantly running, and I'm forgetting what's most important. I'm worn out. I'm tired. I heard Dr. Croft talk about this just a moment ago, where you're irritable, you're snappy, you don't want to fool with nobody, don't call me, that sort of thing. What would you say to your fellow colleagues about the importance of self-care, even as young preachers, young pastors? What are your thoughts? What would you say to them? Come on, Adrian Bullock, talk to me.
I'll be honest with you, self-care is something that I'm still working on. I'll admit that. I am one of those that likes to run, rip, and go everywhere. But more and more I'm learning that there is a balance to this stuff.
Absolutely.
And there are boundaries that should be created. So you shouldn't always have to answer a phone call at 10 o'clock in the evening. Go watch a movie, as one of my friends over here, Mike is my best example of someone that will take self-care. I can call him at 4 o'clock in the evening on a Friday. Doc, what are you doing? I'm on my way to go to the movies. I'm going to take care of myself. That's a major thing. Making those boundaries, setting time for yourself, setting time for your family, not having to always answer emails and things like that. Learning the value of the word no is another big thing. So finding that balance, finding those boundaries.
That's good. Rev Mike, what's the last movie you went to see, bro?
Oh, man.
Adrian set you up. I just don't ride.
Shucks. Let me see. I went and saw Smile
Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was crazy. My good friend Reverend Dr. Dahaji Wright, he said, man, go to Regal and get you the unlimited movie thing.
Yeah.
It's like $21 a month, best $21 a month I will ever spend.
Wow.
If it's out, I'm gonna just go see it. It don't even matter.
Awesome.
And I'm gonna get the big old popcorn
There you
too.
go. There you go.
Ain't no shame in my game.
Extra butter. I ain't mad at
Extra butter. But you gotta put it on yourself. They don't give you the salt no more. But with that, I've also come to the place where with that saying no, I heard Bishop Joseph Walker say that whenever you say yes to something, you're automatically saying no to something else.
Sure.
And the reality is, I think in our churches, when all of the young preachers you see here and the others who are within our convention are very gifted. Yeah. And we are within our churches, most times the only young preacher in our church, and we wear an S on our chest. Everybody thinks that we can do everything. And so with that I'm still learning how to say no, just because of my passion for the local church. But with that, most times Adrian calls me, he be like, man, you always eating something. You daggone right I am. Right? Doc, you always buying something. You daggone right I am. Because I work hard. And because I work hard, I ought to be able to treat myself. But it's also so that I can continue to find ways to fill my cup. Go away to homecoming, go away to the beach, just take a weekend so that I can be in position to pour. Because if I'm not full myself, now I'm pouring from an empty cup, and the people of God suffer.
Absolutely. Which really is, it's important that we make sure that we make that known. That even as preachers need a life outside of the four walls of the sanctuary. People need a life beyond the pulpit. You need that. You need that moment to release. You definitely need it. Reverend Isom, talk to me a little bit about self-care. Talk to me.
Well, praise God. So get a hobby. Get a hobby.
Yeah.
So me personally, I am a gamer. That is what I do, and I'm unapologetic about it.
All right.
I'm a gamer, and
What
that
you play?
helps me to.
What you play?
Oh, I'm a PC gamer.
Oh, PC. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right, we'll talk. Okay. All right.
I thought we were gonna have to challenge him on NBA.
No. You will win for sure. You will definitely win. You'll win. Yeah, you'll win. So in getting a hobby, it helps me to wind down.
Yeah.
Because I love church folk. But with one of the things that I learned from seasoned preachers was that they will kill you if you let them.
Yes, sir.
And you have to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, because one of the leading causes of death among preachers is heart attacks.
Absolutely.
And heart issues. And you need to make sure that you are able to relax your heart rate on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
And for me, that is getting on my gaming PC, cut it on, and I'm gonna have a good time. That's me.
I love it. You made me think about my father. My father used to say, church folk will kill you and tell the Lord you died. May I say that again? Church folks will kill you and tell the Lord you died. Will come to the funeral and stand and look over you. Eat fried chicken, green beans, potato salad, and red Kool-Aid. And then as soon as that service is over, they're looking for the next one. Amen. Our time is quickly coming to an end, so allow me, if you will, to ask this last question. It has been stated, ladies and gentlemen, that true leaders are readers. In your final moment, can you tell us at this very present moment, what are you reading and what impact is it having on your life?
Sure. So right now, I'm reading a book called Lead Small, and this is all about small groups. And it is really in particular for youth ministry, but it can be for any area, any ministry within the church. But truth be told, I'm not really reading as much as I would like to say that I am. I really am doing more podcasting because podcasting, the information seems to be more current at times than a book. And so most of the podcasts that I listen to are in the areas of business and entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Very nice.
Yes, sir. So the book that I'm currently working through is called Frustrated Fellowship by Melvin Washington. So it covers the history of the Black Baptist Church from the 1700s up until the 80s, our various comings together and splits apart, and also touches a little bit on the social gospel aspect of our ministry.
Awesome.
I would say outside of the news, which I'm a fan of, I've been working on The Seminarian, which is about the life of Dr. King while he was in seminary and trying to figure out what he believed while in school. So that's the book I'm working on.
That's great.
Yes. So yeah, outside of my school textbooks, which are too dry to recommend to anybody at this point, I'm really enjoying reading this book that actually was recommended by my professor. It's called My Grandmother's Hands. I think it was a New York Times bestseller maybe a year or two ago, and by Resma Menachem. And it's definitely a spiritual practices book, and that's a challenge for me because I struggle with like the meditative practices and being still. I like to run too. I'm on it. I'm a go-getter. So the book has been helping me really slow down, which is good for my self-care.
Yes.
To slow down, to breathe, and it actually ties in a lot of contemporary issues, particularly from the Black perspective of someone living in these United States at this time as well. And so it has suggestions and some meditative practices for those of us who are oppressed in these United States, and ways that we can breathe through and realize the traumas that we live through. So it's a very accessible book. It has some really practical tools on how to meditate, how to slow down, how to just be aware of your breathing, how to interact with someone else who may be kind of triggering you or getting your blood pressure up, which, that rarely happens in a church. But if it does, you might want to give it a try.
Absolutely. Brothers and sisters, I think it is safe to say that the church is in good hands with this generation that is coming up. Would you help me celebrate the Reverend Michael Eley? Help me celebrate Minister DaQuan Isom. Help me celebrate Reverend Adrian Bullock. Help me celebrate Reverend Tara Gibbs. And would you give yourselves a hand? Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Again, we thank Dr. Barr and Dr. Lynch for giving us this opportunity to highlight some of the next generations of proclaimers of the gospel who have vision, who have mission, and who have a passion to take the church to the next level and the next dimension in Him. Blessings be upon all of you is our prayer. Let us continue to enjoy the rest of our great convention, and may God's blessings forever be among you. Give yourselves another hand. God's blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you.